The development context of Fantasy Maiden Wars revolved around turning the group's passion for the Touhou Project series into something much bigger. A super tactical game clearly inspired by Super Robot Wars, but completely rooted in Gensokyo's vibe. Many people who grew up immersed in Touhou fan games and adaptations will notice deep references and an authentic desire to honor tradition through SRPG and bullet hell mechanics. It's the kind of production where you can tell it was made out of love, not to follow trends or please the Western market. The project began with several episodic versions released over more than a decade, later refined and compiled into a definitive edition, which finally became the basis for the global release. When you talk about decades of doujin production, the impression is of a game made patiently, where each part was carefully polished over time, maybe even with a certain attachment. The developers weren't in a hurry to finish, but to get the tone right, and that shows in the insane amount of content from playable characters to a soundtrack with over 200 tracks, and the incredibly detailed Touhou glossary packed with context for those who take the time to dive deep. The decision to reimagine and unite various stories from the Touhou Project series into a single narrative arc was perhaps Sambondo's biggest challenge, as well as a massive display of affection. The team had the mission of stitching different narratives together and fitting everything into a tactical universe, where each heroine had her own voice and clear role, without losing that fanfic flavor that makes Japanese indie productions so charming. Somehow, they managed to turn this organized chaos into a fluid experience, making the game accessible to newcomers while being almost a love letter to hardcore Touhou fans. It's impossible to talk about the development context without sharing a bit of my perspective. Every time I see games like this, what stands out to me is when the team prioritizes the franchise's legacy and the details only those who truly lived the scene would notice. Fantasy Maiden Wars has that distinct created among friends vibe, where every pixel and dialogue reveals curiosities, tributes, and inside jokes, typical of teams that aren't part of big studios and don't have to justify their choices to investors. It even seems like there's a direct relationship between the time invested in each character and the team's individual care, something rare since indie became a global trend. The team faced several dilemmas: how to balance character fidelity with new mechanics, how to keep a passionate fan base engaged without turning the project into a mere Touhou remix. During that period, there were constant improvements, small revisions, and content additions with each cycle, giving that sense of an ever-evolving work. Those who followed from the early builds know that each stage brought impactful structural and system changes. Development had a very personal and handcrafted dynamic, nothing like the industrialized process of big studios. Many of the dialogues, sprites, and tracks came from volunteer work and fan collaborations, revealing an inside-out production approach, where every new asset was tested, shared, and tweaked in almost family-like cycles. That gives the game the charm of Japanese fan games. Among hundreds of playable characters, there are animations and interactions that only work because they were custom-made for an audience that truly knows every nuance of the Touhou universe. The story takes place in Gensokyo, a land portrayed as a world where humans, yokai, and gods coexist, while a series of supernatural incidents threatens peace in the region. Without delving into specific plot details, the game bridges different stories and characters from the Touhou universe, creating a narrative arc that connects multiple events, bringing an atmosphere of mystery and adventure that invites both veterans and newcomers to explore this vibrant, multi-layered world. In my opinion, Fantasy Maiden Wars presents just the right level of engagement for those who enjoy Japanese mythology and folklore woven into a tactical war setting. Gensokyo's detailed and reference-filled setting feels like a celebration of Touhou culture, full of history, music, and charismatic characters. The game balances that lore with challenging gameplay that demands strategy, positioning, and understanding of Danmaku attack patterns, creating an experience that stands out from both traditional RPGs and bullet hells. When playing, it's easy to realize the game is much more than a tribute. It represents a creative evolution for fans of the genre and the series. To me, beyond its technical aspects, there's a narrative care that values the individual stories of each character, building an emotional connection with the player. Without spoilers, the game carries a nostalgic feeling with a touch of innovation, especially in how it integrates the Touhou universe into a strategy RPG format, offering a unique and very entertaining experience. What I find most interesting about Fantasy Maiden War's approach is its ability to balance an engaging story with challenging gameplay that doesn't grow tiresome even after several hours. For those who like games that mix narrative depth with tactical combat that requires planning, this title seems to have everything. And for Touhou fans, it feels like being part of a special event where all the lore, music, and characters unite to create a more immersive and personal experience. Something I find essential in a good niche game. From my perspective, if you enjoy a well-written story full of cultural references and want to experience a gameplay system that merges bullet hell with strategy, Fantasy Maiden Wars, Dream of the Stray Dreamer is a great pick, especially for the atmosphere it delivers. Dream of the Stray Dreamer is a turn-based tactical RPG with grid-based battles reminiscent of the Super Robot Wars series, but featuring Touhou's full cast. Gameplay revolves around the strategic positioning of characters on a square grid map, where you move units to attack, defend, or use special abilities. It's a simple, almost classic SRPG system, but it shines through the variety of characters and unique mechanics, with over 70 fighters to command, each having distinct skills and stats to upgrade. What really caught my attention was how the game blends strategic gameplay with Touhou's signature bullet hell style, especially in battles, where besides positioning for attacks, you also need to dodge patterned Danmaku attacks on the grid. It adds an extra layer of tactical challenge that feels refreshingly different. It reminded me of old good SRPGs, but with a bit of frenzy that keeps adrenaline high. As a strategy fan and Touhou enthusiast, seeing each unit with its own flashy spell cards and customizable abilities was very exciting. Skill customization allows you to build a team suited to your style, focusing on defense, attack, mobility, or buffs to enhance performance. That level of control adds depth to gameplay, even if combat seems simple at first glance. Still, I have to admit the usability issues bothered me. Controls are unintuitive and confusing. Discovering that Z confirms and X cancels feels awkward, especially for players used to international standards like Enter, Spacebar, or mouse controls. This impacts the game's flow and could be better resolved with key binding options, which aren't available. That hurts the experience a bit for those who don't want to wrestle with controls. Overall, I see Fantasy Maiden Wars gameplay as an excellent foundation with potential to grow even more. The mix of tactical combat and bullet hell elements is fun and refreshing, though technical and control issues should be addressed. If you like SRPGs with deep customization and are a Touhou fan, you'll have a great time managing your characters and exploring the protagonist's multiple stories. But I'd wait until the control issues are fixed before diving in completely. Still, its style and concept already won me over. The game's visuals take clear inspiration from classic SRPGs with hand-drawn pixel art and detailed sprites. It gives off a nostalgic, retro feel that I personally love, bringing back memories of old-school games while still being neatly polished. Characters are relatively small on screen, but have attack animations full of energy and personality, bringing life to battles and making each movement visually interesting. Despite using sprites, the game doesn't look simplistic. The level of detail in spellcard animations and visual effects is impressive. Bright flashes, explosions, and impact effects are crafted with care, keeping 2D simplicity from ever feeling dull. The game successfully balances sprite-based technical simplicity with visual richness, something that fans of the genre will appreciate. Backgrounds, however, are simpler and somewhat generic, looking like assets made in RPG Maker-style tools. This slightly dulls the overall presentation since battlefields feel static compared to the flashy animations. In that sense, a more elaborate background design could have elevated the entire visual energy of the game. One thing that stood out to me was the use of color. The game does a great job using a vibrant palette, especially on characters and attacks, making battles pop visually. However, menus and UI areas don't share the same visual energy, creating a slightly unbalanced look. As someone who values cohesive visuals, I feel a more refined interface could tie the presentation together. But I understand the focus lies on the battle experience. Personally, I admire the artistic choice here. In a time when many games chase ultra-realistic polygonal graphics, Fantasy Maiden Wars delivers a refreshing return to sprite art and animation. For me, it creates a unique charm that only this style can achieve, even at the cost of modern graphic flourishes in environments and UI. The game's visuals perfectly fit Touhou Project's atmosphere, grounding the experience in its aesthetic roots. While not visually groundbreaking in scenery design, it compensates with strong identity and appealing art direction. When diving into Fantasy Maiden Wars, the first thing you notice isn't a pursuit of photorealism or ultra-high textures, but rather the smoothness and complexity of a tactical RPG inspired by classics like Super Robot Wars. My performance analysis therefore focuses not on frame counts, but on how well the game performs in terms of flow, responsiveness, and visual spectacle. From what I observed, performance is one of its strongest pillars, ensuring an agile, immersive, and technically solid experience. Visually, it's a 2D sprite spectacle that runs perfectly smoothly. I think this artistic choice was smart. It creates nostalgia for the 32-bit SRPG era and ensures rock-solid performance. Character animations, both on the tactical map and during battles, are incredibly fluid and detailed. Every attack feels like a choreographed dance of effects and movement that never stutters. On modern hardware, whether PC or Nintendo Switch, this graphical style poses no performance challenge, allowing developers to focus on polishing effects instead. One of my biggest concerns with strategy games is how performance holds when the screen is crowded. Fantasy Maiden Wars handles it impeccably. Even with dozens of characters on the field, map navigation and scrolling remain silky smooth, with no lag when switching units or planning complex moves. A true benchmark for tactical RPGs. Battle animations are at the heart of the experience, and performance here is flawless. Every spell card or special attack explodes with creativity and energy, lasting several seconds full of particle and lighting effects, all running perfectly. No drops, no stutter, just uninterrupted visual thrills. That's crucial because any slowdown would break the flow and satisfaction of combat. Performance here directly enhances the game's fantasy of power. Another key aspect is UI responsiveness, and Fantasy Maiden Wars excels at it. Menus respond instantly, even when managing 70+ customizable characters. There's no input lag when navigating skill trees or equipping items, making micromanagement a breeze. That level of responsiveness, often underestimated, is a major quality of life triumph. On Switch, it runs flawlessly both docked and handheld. On PC, it'll perform perfectly on almost any modern setup. Choosing a platform boils down to preference, not technical performance. In my opinion, Fantasy Maiden Wars performance is a complete success. It's not about raw graphical power, but about delivering a smooth, fast, and immersive strategic experience. Fluid animations, responsive menus, and large-scale battles without lag are its technical triumphs. Buying Fantasy Maiden Wars, Dream of the Stray Dreamer at launch depends on your player profile and expectations. Honestly, I see it as a feast for Touhou fans and strategy enthusiasts craving variety and depth. Over 70 playable characters, each customizable and with unique special attacks, make it appealing to those who love investing time in battle systems. On the other hand, if you're unfamiliar with Touhou, you might feel lost. The story, though well written, assumes some prior knowledge of the universe that could push away players seeking a straightforward SRPG, though those open to exploring new lore will find it rewarding. What really stands out for me is the passion behind the presentation, detailed sprites, polished animations, and a killer soundtrack with dozens of Touhou arrangements. Even though it's a fan-made project, that care makes everything more engaging, but don't expect AAA polish. If you value intuitive controls, be aware that many players criticize the messy input scheme, especially when using a controller instead of a keyboard. Combat mixes strategy and bullet hell, so it's not just slow troop maneuvering. You must watch attack patterns on screen, making each battle hectic. I think that's brilliant for those who want a twist on classic SRPGs, but it may feel overwhelming for traditional players. In short, Touhou fans will find a playground here, while Super Robot Wars fans seeking something new will likely enjoy it, if they don't mind the quirks. If you're after a dense, character-rich experience with many systems to explore, Dream of the Stray Dreamer fits the bill. But if your budget is tight or you're not desperate to play on day one, I'd suggest waiting. It's unlikely to disappear from radar, and patches or discounts may soon follow. That way, you can benefit from community feedback and avoid early bugs typical of small releases. However, if you're a collector, a Touhou devotee, or simply excited to see what this bullet hell RPG offers, there's no reason to wait. Still, for those looking for a polished, universally accessible experience, patience might pay off. Fantasy Maiden Wars is best suited for players already invested in the Touhou universe, or those curious to experience a creative blend of tactics and bullet hell, knowing accessibility isn't its top priority.